Hello and welcome to Holy Men's online series with Mastermind Connect, which is a virtual circle led by Omar Davis using the tools of alchemy to find inner wisdom and build brotherhood. Holy Men is a space for men to come and talk about the real shit. Life, work, relationships, family issues, or anything on your heart. In this space, we will open up the conversation to understand our perception, divine balance, our mind, our miracle body, inner wisdom, and the formations of sacred geometry. Welcome to Holy Men. Good day and welcome all people, everybody who's out there with us. Thank you for being here. Welcome to Holy Men with Mastermind Connect. We are here to continue the series of helping men to not only get in tune with themselves, but also redefining some of the things that we have learned. Now, if you have been with us for the past two shows, you've seen a progression of the information that we've been building on. You know, the first part was about redefining manhood and understanding what it means to be a man in today's world when you have all these different concepts. And then you have divine balance and learning about balance within our life, balance within the masculine and feminine, and then balance within the divine idea of what you are. So now we're going to continue with understanding more of the mind. We're going to talk about the mind and what is the mind. For all of you out there watching, leave your comments. We recommend that you just go ahead and type them in for us so we can have them scroll down here at the bottom so we can see exactly what it is that you have to say as you are part of this conversation. We welcome it. Now, as for today, we have two gentlemen who are also my brothers of Mastermind Connect. I don't even know where to begin because once again, like all the members, like I have such a connection with them and we have so many things to talk about, so many things in common, but also we have a lot of differences too. So when it comes down to it, I have so much to say about them, but I'm just gonna keep it real easy, keep it real short. First, we're gonna bring out my brother, JD Weatherspoon. He is a phenomenal inspiration to me for a lot of reasons, not only in the way he lives his life, some of the things we talk about as far as being in relationships, and just some of the things that we deal with on an emotional level. He's always been there to support me on that. He's not only a super well-educated brother, but he's also super compassionate, and he's always been there for me. So welcome, JD. How you doing, brother?
I am excited to be here, man. It's been a very, very eventful but fluid day. I'm guessing the energy of this whole call, because you're leading it, it's probably going to echo that sentiment. So I'm putting one foot in front of the other, and I'm just ready to get into this good game.
Awesome, man. Yeah. Good to have you here, man. And the other brother that we're going to bring on, Carlos Davila. This man has connected with me on many occasions, and even sometimes where it may have been a little tumultuous to a point where even we just work shit out. And not only that, we're both fathers, and we've been able to not only connect on that level, we've connected on many levels where we can not only grow as individuals, but learn from each other, but also just support. You know, I've watched this man not only the way he reacts and responds to his kids and how he responds as a father, you know, the back end and where he's doing his thing as far as promoting his business. But not only that, he's very also another intellectual.
Hopefully we'll get Omar right back, y'all. JD, Manny's saying to
in that minute of, look, we had a bit of a tech malfunction. So what we're going to continue with in this episode, because today is all about, you know, understanding the difference between the brain and the mind. So piggybacking off the direction that Omar was probably going to take us in, the brain. Now, I don't have Omar's fancy presentation, but in order to get into
there he is. There
you go.
What just happened? You know, I'm sitting here talking the whole time.
The universe, you know, the universe hates sometimes. You know, they don't want to shine. You know,
it's funny. Yeah, exactly. This whole full moon, new moon. energy, I'm like, is Mercury, what's happening? Because it happened yesterday too, like where suddenly everybody was just gone and I was still talking. So with that said,
Well,
I'm glad that you
cricket is
brothers
in
were able to hold it
retrograde. That's
down.
what that was. That was cricket in retrograde.
Yeah, cricket,
Stop
exactly.
tethering off the Boost Mobile, man. Come on, stop it.
Boost Mobile. Who does Boost?
Earthlink.
I got no business playing that Boost.
Not Earthlink, right? Let me ask you.
That's hilarious. I don't know what any of those things are, but we're gonna move on. So getting into it, fellas, I wanted to bring this conversation about the mind and understand what it means to conceive this whole idea of the mind. Previous conversations that we had, as I just said, it was a lot about understanding two things. One is, what have we been taught about manhood? How do we define it? How does it relate to us? And how have we adapted, right? How have we learned how to learn new skills as a man in today's world? And then the second episode was really about understanding how it is that we attain balance and what it is that is divine, right? We talk about this divine energy, divine God. But to really comprehend it, we went into sacred geometry, where we simply looked at some of the steps in which life created itself. And then from there, we flash forwarded into this idea of balance of the masculine and the feminine, which is something we're definitely going to talk about today, as we all know that in this idea of the mind and in the head brain, you have this concepts of masculine energy or feminine energy. And for those of you who may think that that is a part of your actual like sex or your biology, it is not. Both human, male, female, have a left and right side of their brain that happens to just work in this way. So we're going to get really deep into this. So I'm looking forward to it. But because you guys are super intellectual brothers and you know how to carry yourself well in the conversation, I'm curious to know and how you came to understand more about the brain, right? And how it functions. And whichever one wants to jump on that. What is the brain?
I mean, I can start. I think, being a psychologist, like I've had a very specific understanding and training about, what the brain is as a structure and how it functions and what neurotransmitters do what and what chemicals do this and, what areas of the brain impact this, that, and the third, right? Then you also add the impact that socialization has on how our brain works and how we process and how we understand our world, right? Because our brain, yes, it's this, combination of different muscles and fibers that create this ability to process information and take information in and understand what to do with that information. And we all have that same component, but it works differently because we've all been trained to use it differently, right? We learn different languages. We have different life trajectories that impact that. So structurally, it's the same thing, but it's so different because of the things that you have to feed it for it to grow is going to be different from person to person, right? So having an understanding of that, and thank you for the kind words you said about me as a dad, that plays a big part in how I communicate with my kids, right? The reason why, like, I can have the kind of conversations that, like, you've both been privy to with, like, say, Adumi, who's my youngest, right? Like, and literally be like, yo, who is this dude? Like, this is not an 11. Like, there are moments where I'm like, yo, who the fuck? Who's in? Sorry.
Who's me, man.
I didn't know, if that
have you been here before?
So we can. I mean, I'm trying to be respectful of the people. They might be watching with their kids and their children. But like, I've had conversations with this kid that I'm like, yo, this dude has been here before. And I think a big part of it is that I've always treated them, not, I'm going to say as a psychologist, and not in a sense where I feel like separate from them, but like all the stuff that you learn about like how the human mind works and how we take in and process information, right? And how kids are literally sponges. Like, all the shit they learn, you're teaching them in some, direct or indirect fashion, right? So if I want my kids to like know how to communicate with me at a level that like I'm comfortable communicating, and that's a whole nother conversation about me actually as an educated Black male feeling comfortable being an educated Black male. It's a whole nother conversation. for me, it's like, because I have that understanding, that I'm like, you know what? I'm going to make sure that y'all are comfortable being smart. Y'all are comfortable being the brilliant humans that you are, because like it took a while for me to wrap my head around that. And a big part of that was my education in psychology, and understanding like all the things that make our brains different, right? And like allowing that to help me accept the way that I thought, and realizing that some of these maladaptive ways that I was engaging with people and engaging in situations and relationships and family dynamics, it wasn't my fault. You know what I mean? Like I learned it from somewhere. And now I'm at a point where I'm like comfortable enough to be responsible and acknowledge these things and work on them, but I didn't create these things on my own. Sorry, I'm long-winded, y'all.
No, that kind of wraps back into the first episode. JD, you want to jump on that? I saw you was about to say something.
Oh, I always got something to say that. But no, so as far as the brand and development, not touting a firmly established background in the field of psychology as a professional, much like my esteemed colleague Baba Los. But for me, I've always been more of a tinkerer. So being a naturally curious individual, being fortunate enough to be raised by an educator, and essentially learning how to write, grade, evaluate by helping my mama grade homework. Because if you grow up in a house with a teacher, you're on the clock. There's always something that needs to be done. You know what I mean? Anybody who knows how teacher life works knows there's always some work that needs to be done. And so understanding the nuances and like developmental stages and or learning styles at a very early age, because I was always on the hip of somebody who had to study it. Like my mom was going through a master's degree, and being the youngest of five, you're kind of always the one that's glued to your mom's hip because your older siblings are not interested in anything you gotta say. Like, you're 8, I'm 16. We do not live the same life. Like, stay over there. So between that and just always having like a voracious, like, I don't know, I never got sick of learning. I enjoyed the process of feeling new connections being made. It's very much like the movie Lucy, no cap. I ain't gonna front on that. And so taking that and applying it to the world at large, seeing how humans interact and how back to nature versus nurture, things like culture, religion, age, socioeconomic status, and seeing all of these things in like this like grand symphony on a daily basis just made me just curious about how the world works, because I felt like if I could get to what the causes and effects and like that relationship dynamic between the two, things will just make more sense. It all really stemmed from wanting to make sense of things.
Yeah, and I see everybody in here is saying what's up in the comments. I want to say what's up back to all y'all, just to recognize that we see y'all. Bring the comments, bring the things that you have to say. And if you have anything that you want to actually post in the comments about what we're responding to, then by all means, we want to hear some of your information and your perspectives as well. So by all means, use that chat. Now, because the brain is divided, I wanted to just jump into something, and one thing that you just stated, JD, was the concept of you being able to learn in a process of being curious and being open to new ideas. That is a really wonderful thing and a quality to have, not only as a human, but especially as a man of color, because it's going to definitely push you past a place where we as men need to go, which is literally being curious about stuff, asking questions, not necessarily falling into the lines of stigma to keep us grounded. And that plays a big part because you're using both sides of your brain. And that's kind of what we want to get into now, is being able to understand that the logical side of your mind, which is the left side of your brain, is also in coordination with the emotional side of your brain. You know, you need logic and emotions to make a firm decision. Like people who say that emotion's not a part of making decisions, but yet justify anger is like, okay, dumb as shit. Like you never make a decision whenever you're angry. What are you doing? So with that said, I wanted to just give the audience a quick image of what I'm talking about. And I'm going to share my screen. And this is going to be really quick. I just want you guys to actually see what it is that is happening within your mind. This way you have an understanding of why the brain and what we're talking about makes a lot more sense. So in this image that you see here, you have both the right and the left side of the brain. The thing that most people don't really understand about the idea of your emotions is that it comes this thing, right? Like on the right side, if you see here, it has a lot to do with color. It has a lot to do with artistic expression, inspiration. It has to do with things that are that awaken you, or to be in the awakened state. It is love, because that once again is emotion. It has to do with even creative thought. And so using this skill and using all this is as a part of using your emotions. You know, it's an emitting. To emote means how you react. And so the left side of your brain, it has all these other parts where it's black and white. You know, it's not really going to give you that vividness. It's going to be very scientific, very what a lot of people say, oh, you're left brained, but that means that you think, you're logical, that you're using the side of your brain that is going to be more about understanding. And so if you just want to understand this from a whole, right? Whenever you use the emotion side plus the logical side and you cross them, you start to realize that, for one, what artist doesn't use a line? A line is very logical, but the line suddenly becomes this creative art, right? And so it's important that we understand this, and maybe let's redefine it, right? Because sometimes people have issues with the idea of masculine and feminine because they associate it with their sexuality or their gender. And it has nothing to do with anything. It's simply the energy that these characteristics hold. Like, for instance, the masculine is considered a square because whenever you make a 90-degree turn, that's a logical, you know, you made 90 degrees. You say, oh, I'm going this way, and we going straight. And so it's 90 degrees. But on the circle, which is the feminine, you don't know if you're walking in a straight line. You just keep going forever. So that allows for that expansion and creation of the process of always going back over, like looking at your emotions, right? Looking at your life, looking at these patterns that you've created. That's an idea that is really related to the feminine quality. And I'm curious to know what you guys think about maybe times where you were able to express your feminine and then also still stand in your masculine, or maybe you have a story that could actually help to engage people to understand that. Whoever.
I was about to say, Los, you want to take this first because both of us have lengthy opportunities.
I think it was more like, hold on, which one am I
exactly.
gonna?
Let me jump in now because you got kids. I can't be dad stories. I don't want to follow that act. So, I would say for me, the biggest instances where that routinely occurs would be, number one, my marriage, and then number two, I would say negotiating partnerships as a family man, because I'm in that 52% of millennials who are currently residing with their parents. Gotta love transition. But then also I think within the realm of business, because a lot of people think like entrepreneurship, like, okay, you bossed up, you're running things, you pretty much point and shoot, and you can tell people go screw themselves whenever you feel like it. And the reality of the situation is you can, in that there's no rule that says you cannot. And don't be surprised if that leaves you with a phone that's not ringing and people who are really trying to spend no time with you, you tell them to go after themselves on a regular basis. So I think for me, it's walking that fine line between, number one, I have a breathtaking amount of things to do on a regular basis, and I have to make parts that are not even in the same room, sometimes not even in the same state, the same time zone, the same country, operate in synchronicity. So that means that requires a certain amount of organization, masculine. You have to prioritize, you have to make executive decisions. And then, of course, anybody who's ever planned anything knows that's the quickest way to make the universe laugh at you. Like, plan in pencil. You can set it up that these three things gonna go in this order on Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I guarantee you 2 of them things are gonna go off center. And if they don't, you should really be worried, because that means you're going to have a heck of a curveball coming at you somewhere in the middle. So between that and finding the mental, energetic, spiritual dexterity to just be agile through all that, that's where the feminine comes in. Because now you got your blueprint to build the plane. You're going off the bridge. Okay, cool. Well, something broke. So now you're gonna have to figure out how to repair the plane on the way down. And that's when it's just like, don't trip on the angle. Just keep walking in a circle until we level out. And I mean, like anyone who's in a relationship, regardless of what that structure looks like, the same can be applied towards somebody having a mood swing. The same can be applied towards, living with my parents and then being in their second childhood. So it's pretty much like dealing with a 12-year-old, but in an X-year-old age body. You can't really tell them nothing. I ain't got to do nothing like that. So, you have to balance all of these. It takes some sleight of hand, but it also takes a lot of staying ahead of the curve. You sort of got to see where things are going before they get there. And maintaining that balance is really what the major key of the day is, and no 2 days are the same. So
yeah, big time. And if any of you out there who are listening and a part of this conversation, go ahead and leave any comments about what you think the masculine or the feminine, or how you feel, or maybe a time whenever you had this reality of living in either. And leave it in the comment, and we'll go ahead and jump on that as soon as we finish with Los, because now he gonna be talking too. Nah.
I mean, look, if there's any other example of planning in pencil in 2020, like
exactly.
I mean, like this is not where a lot of us expect it to be. But I think for me, kind of accepting that feminine part of my energy has been something that like was a huge deterrent for me early on in my adulthood, and like, being a little bit older and being honestly, and this is going to sound whatever, but like being significantly wiser at this point in my life, you look back at things like that and you realize that a lot of it had to do with like these insecurities I had around being perceived in any way feminine, right? Like I've always been relatively soft-spoken. Like, even though I'm always in a very sort of extroverted type of spaces, whether it's being a professor in front of 30-something kids, or whether it's being a fitness instructor and, having at times hundreds of people like literally looking at me, the whole time, and having to be like this sort of externalized personality. A lot of times I didn't allow myself to understand that, like, for me to recover, like I needed to be in spaces that felt more nurturing. Right. And I couldn't understand sort of that. But I'm always in these spaces, like clearly I'm comfortable, but I've always been uncomfortable in those spaces. Like literally every time I'm public right now, I'm uncomfortable. Right. Because there's something about being in these spaces that like I still as much work on myself in therapy and being in these groups and having conversations with both of you gentlemen, by the fire on these camping trips. Yo, if y'all have not been on a camping trip, y'all are fucking up. That's just a public service.
Word.
On some real grown up stuff, like these trips have had a very, and I don't know if I've said this to both of you, and I know this is a weird segue, but like those trips have had a really significant impact on even some of the stuff that we're talking about, like me being a lot more comfortable expressing myself in a way that feels genuine to me, and not feeling like I have to be this representation of myself because of the way that I look and what those sort of expectations are. Like, I feel like because of you gentlemen, like I can tap into, whether it's masculine or feminine, like tap into parts of myself that I've always felt like I've had to kind of reserve, right? Or I can only do in like specific situations, like with my kids, right? Like there's not a day, regardless of, the divorce and like the separation and like not having them with me all the time. And now, honestly, luckily in 2020, because of the pandemic, like they're spending more time with me because they're not in school in Long Island right now. Like, so it's been for me, and I acknowledge that it's a privilege. It's been a blessing in disguise. But I've always made sure that like every single day that I'm on this earth and they're on this earth, they hear me say, I love you. Like every night at some point before they go to bed, if it's me leaving a voice message, if they're already asleep or whatever, like that's going to happen every day. And it's because my mother had issues with saying that to me when I was a kid, right? And I know how that made me feel, right? So tapping into that part of myself that allows there to be a certain level of emotion and expression of emotion, and making that something that's normalized for my kids is something that I've always been like really conscious of. Like I want my kids to feel comfortable, identifying however they want to identify and presenting in whatever way they want to present. And I want to make sure that I create a space where however they want to evolve into the men that they're going to become, they have that comfort, they have that understanding that you don't have to be anything that you're not. Like literally happened on one of the trips that we were on, and I had a conversation with my oldest CJ, who he's not a thug. Like he's never going to be a thug. Like that's just not who he is, right? He's not going to communicate in that way, right? Because that's not the atmosphere that he's around, right?
Yeah.
If I wanted to, I could. I grew up in the Bronx in the 80s. Like shit was real, right? And I know what that life was like, right? But there was a moment where he was communicating with another one of the kids on the trip and trying to sound more like the kid was sounding. And I was like, that's not you. Like, stop. Like, don't try to be. He's like, oh, but I want people to like me. If they like you for being and they don't like you, fam, like that's because clearly that's not you. Like, I can see how uncomfortable you are trying to be this
maintain that
other
posture.
like, yeah, like I'm like, yo, like look on Instagram, like every third thing will be like, be you, they'll adjust. Like, and it's real. Like you don't have to be anything that, and I told him, it's like, don't get it twisted. Like all this Instagram love that you see your father getting and all this other stuff, like there's plenty of people out there that don't like me. And some people have like legit reasons for not liking me because I haven't always been the person that I am right now. Right. Like, but you have to accept that at some point, like who you are, because you can't, the work that things like this space are meant to facilitate, right? And these conversations that we're having with Omar and when we have these one-on-one situations when outside was still open, like some of the deepest and most impactful conversations that I've had that have made me rethink like the type of man that I am and become comfortable in my manhood have been conversations that I've had with this group, because there's comfort in knowing that vulnerability isn't taboo, right? Because again, that's another thing that we always consider kind of feminine, right? Like, you ain't supposed to be feminine, son. You ain't supposed to be out here.
No, like let's dive into it because I like that piece, right? Because now you're thinking who you are versus who you think you're supposed to be in your mind's eye, and it's you, but it's a fragment of you. You know what I mean? Like that's your ego, which of course always gets a bad rap in the same way that like, well, yeah, it's a tool. Like if you give somebody $1 million and they don't have a frame of reference for like what the value of $1 is, you're probably going, like you're gonna pour champagne on some models and you're gonna go buy.
You're gonna be the trust free well.
Exactly. You're gonna speak with all that.
Yeah,
you're gonna stack that. You're gonna G off, and you're gonna be a millionaire for all of 2 hours. And so I think people in regard. So now you have like that.
I apologize for any Latrell Sprewell fans, y'all.
Look, you already know you were of age in Bronx in the 80s. You dated yourself properly, right? So
just putting it out
anyone
there.
born after 2002 has no frame of reference for who Latrell Sprewell is. They don't like spinning rims. They don't. That's not their thing. But anyway, so this ego though, like that whole ego brain, monkey mind, distractions. Like, what's that shit? Because clearly, in order, like, all of us here had to learn to acknowledge that piece, figure out what our ism was and how that appealed to us. Because ego's tricky, right? Like, it's tricky as shit. You'll think you've identified it on level 1. Cool. Let's just evolve to level 2 right quick. You know what I mean? Like
that's actually, I'm glad that you talked just about that, because I'm curious to know, with the ideas that Carlos was just speaking of, with teaching his son how to respond in a way that it changes the habits of our generation, right? It changes the habits that we've been taught about, like, fuck emotions, like cut that shit off. But we had to learn like mid stride, like, but wait, I don't fucking feel good, and I'm gonna blow some shit up if I don't get this shit together, or I'm gonna internally collapse and I'm gonna be all fucked up. So with that, it helped me to, in my personal experience, to identify that, a lot of these times when we're dealing with these concepts of masculine, feminine, and how we've been taught, then it comes that ego, right? It comes that fight or flight, that monkey mind. And so I'm curious to know, and I know we can go on this a lot for the ego, so we're going to keep this one real short because we want to move on. But as far as the monkey mind and the ego, have you guys even had an experience where you had the ego mind and the monkey mind be like a beneficial and like a confidence coach in your corner versus like self-sabotage some bitch that is always over it? Any stories, any relations?
Well, that's
I'll keep mine. I'm sorry, JD. I'll keep mine really short. I think for me, like I allowed my ego, right, to keep me in a relationship that I knew 4 years before it ended I shouldn't have been in. You know what I mean? And it was one of those things where it was like, nah, but like, and it was like the first relationship that could have been serious, like after my divorce, right? So like that ego was like, yo, you got to make this work regardless. Like you can't be a failure. You can't fuck this up again, right? Even though the divorce wasn't completely my fault, but like that's how we think, right? So I think that was a situation where literally like after everything was said and done, I kind of looked back and was like, yo, why did I put myself in a situation where I knew that this wasn't going anywhere? I knew that it was almost like I was punishing myself, right? And my ego was kind of getting in the way of sort of taking a step back and understanding that and seeing beyond that and allowing myself to move on from that situation.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, JD.
How about yourself, JD?
No. That was you were right in the pocket with that. So Candace, thank you so much for tuning in, Lovey. What's going on? Also, Alistair, Talib, Mike, I see all your boys, man. Love.
What's going on, people?
But yeah, Candace dropped a comment and it was, what was your turning point as men? Like the aha moment that showed you that pursuing and sharing your own vulnerability was important. Which just screams synchronicity to me because it's a statement. But I think that's the real turning point, right? Like usually you don't realize things are broken until they stop working. Like no one cares about changing their oil until that funny smelling burning smell and that check engine light cut on. And
yeah. So like, and even then you're gonna give it a little bit. Even then you're gonna be like, she's gonna be all right.
And we make it through the weekend, right? And so usually it's when you get left on the side of the road. Now, unless you drive a Honda or a Toyota, in which case it could be about to fall apart and they just always gonna start. But in most other cases,
we trying to get these sponsorship checks, y'all. We trying to get these sponsorship checks.
Look, man, I already know how the game go. They ain't gonna break. They ain't gonna break.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, for me, it was realizing I have all of these boxes checked off, right? Like for me, I think my real aha moment started like in undergrad. I was fortunate enough to like start to kind of realize between the ages of 19 and 21, I don't think I like how this shit is going. Like it looks cool. It's really fun. It's made for some great nights that I don't remember much of. But the reality of the situation is this isn't nutritious. Like I still find myself yearning for something. And I know what I'm currently doing is not it. But I think for me, it was the acknowledgement that I have these thoughts, these feelings, these ideas, these dreams, these memories, some of which aren't even necessarily mine, that I have no frame of reference for. And I don't know how to get these answers. So for me, it all started with questions. The vulnerability piece was just realizing, like, in some regards, I think I agree with you, Los, where like at one point I was soft-spoken. I think nurture and environment made it very apparent to me very quickly that either I was going to learn how to occupy more space or I was going to be cool with being a fixture in the background. And partially because of ego, I was like, nah, that ain't gonna happen. So I guess I'm just gonna get louder and just make myself bigger. and then being sort of like the runt of the litter, so to speak. Like I'm the only dude in my family over the age of like 16 that's less than 6 feet tall. So now it's double, and also there are like a million of us. So if I want to be acknowledged at all, like I'm gonna talk louder, and then my gestures are gonna be more grandiose, and I'm gonna be so intense with my energy that you're gonna have to pay attention. You know what I'm saying? Steve, I want to go see this shit. It's real. Like, my mouth is open, yours is closed, and that's that on that. We ain't gonna have no back and forth on it. And then realizing that I was actually steamrolling people, and so I would cheat myself out of a lot of opportunities to build really meaningful connections with folks, because they would see and it's like, oh yeah, this motherfucker's extra. Let me move out the way. Or like he's just not gonna listen. Like all I see is your ego, which is understandable in and of itself, but I think that's one of those situations where people will decide to not enter a house because they don't like how the door frame looks.
Yeah.
And
no, that's a beautiful thing. No, I was just saying that's a beautiful thing, because even in the idea of what we're talking about as far as the mind and the ego and the using both of those processes, you can't have vulnerability without courage. To one of Candace's point, so sometimes you have to stand in courage in order to understand vulnerability, and sometimes in order to be courageous, you got to be vulnerable and be the first one to step out. And so understanding when the turning point was for me, it was definitely a moment of like literally just coming out of fucking jail. I'm like driving home from fucking jail, like, yo,
that'll do it.
Something ain't right. And I was 20, and it was just a moment where I was like, yo, honestly, I need to find out why I'm so fucking angry. Like, like I got some issues, my dude. And so that was my journey, where, like you said, JD, it's the questioning aspect that really, it helps you to have that turning point as a man. You have to question. You have to question not only the world around you, but your own actions, and be honest with yourself. Whenever you fucking up, you got to say, yeah, I fucked up, and be, vulnerable enough or courageous enough to actually say that I'm sorry to people that you've hurt. But moving forward, there's something that I really liked that was said earlier about understanding whenever you don't follow your intuition, and what you were saying, Los, and you stayed in that relationship, even though you knew, like in the background, right, in the feeling that this wasn't really for you. And that's the next topic that I really want to get into, which is called the second brain. And not a lot of people actually know that they have more than one brain in their body. You have the head brain. You have the second brain, which is your enteric nervous system. It's the gut brain. It's literally a brain or a neurological plexus that aligns from the very top of your esophagus, all your intestinal lining, all the way down to the very tip of your anus. And it processes a lot of serotonin. Say that again,
Omar.
Let's talk about
it. Where is the second brain? Show the gut line, boss.
Top, up in here, all the way down to the very bottom of your anus. And if you don't know what your anus is, it's your asshole. It's the exit. It's right before you get to the asshole. Then there's the sphincter, and that we got to be very clear. The sphincter and the anus ain't the same thing. So with that said, the enteric nervous system is a very important part, because this idea of serotonin being released in your gut, it processes feelings and emotions. And and serotonin is a neurotransmitter. So it allows your body to transmit the understanding of a chemical. And so with that said, a lot of people, like, they can't conceive the idea of a second brain, but they hear things like follow your gut, trust your gut, or follow your intuition. And so this is where that brain would lie. Los, you had that feeling on the inside. And once again, it was a feeling. Now, I'm going to really quickly give y'all folks that needed some information about this this second brain situation. And this is going to be also really quick, because this is a lot of information. But the reason that I want you guys to see this is because your ego is going to try to play you at times, right? So this helps you to even trust your feelings that much more, because you know that there's actually some shit going on inside of your body. So this is an intestinal wall, right? Now, if you peel back the first layer, right, this little tiny thin layer, you see these yellow lines, that's a plexus, that's nerves. And if you peel back under the muscle of your actual intestine, you see more nerves. And the red is the vein and the blue is the artery. And so all this yellow stuff are actually neurological plexuses, just like the stuff that comes from your brain into your arms and feet. And if you go even lower, you see even more plexuses that's wrapped within this structure. So the brain is literally called the wait, that's wrong. I'm sorry. It's called the enteric nervous system. I'm reading the damn word up here. Sorry. But the enteric nervous system is what your brain is called, your gut. Get it together, Omar. And so with that said, I'm curious to know, now that we've just kind of brought that up, can you guys give me possibly another time where you felt your feelings and not necessarily had the thoughts that aligned with those feelings, and it led you in a place where you weren't comfortable, or possibly it led you in a place where you were like, yo, I'm glad I trusted myself, you know?
I mean, I think if we can have an honest conversation amongst the gentlemen that are on here, right? Like, we've been in situations where we've been doing something that we know we shouldn't have been doing with the person we shouldn't have been doing it with, right? And or like, real talk, like, think about those situations and think. I'm not putting numbers for anyone.
Protect the innocent. That's right, Loves. Protect the innocent.
But all the time. But real talk, like, where have you felt that? Like think about those situations and think about, like, physiologically, obviously not in certain areas, but like, think about how your gut felt in those situations, right? Whenever we're doing things that we know we shouldn't be doing, or engaging in situations, or we just know that there's something off about this thing, like, really stop and think about not just what's happening cognitively, but like what's happening internally, right? Like why are you getting that upset stomach? Like, why are people getting ulcers because of stress? Like, what's that connection, right? Like, clearly we're taking information in and reacting to it in ways that don't necessarily coincide with what our brain is thinking, right? Because your brain in that situation is like, oh yeah, right? But like, your gut is like, come on, bruh, like, come on, dude, right? So I think for me, like, allowing myself to understand that, like, and again, I didn't necessarily, like, at the time, you know, before speaking to you about a lot of this stuff, like, understand that there was a gut brain, right? And understand that there are these different levels to it. But like, when you spoke to me about it, it made sense, right? Because I could contextualize it and, like, reference things that have happened in my life, and like the way that I felt in those situations, or the way that, like, my body responded, or like my brain and body were kind of not vibing. Like, I remember those situations. I just didn't have the language to kind of put to what those things were. So when you speak about it, yeah, it's not something that I'm, like, well versed in, but like, it makes sense just based on my experiences.
Word up. How about you, JD?
Yeah. Do you want that alphabetically or chronologically? For me, I would say that
backwards, though. Backwards.
Exactly.
In Swahili. In Swahili.
Asante Sana. But yeah, so with that being said, for me, that goes back to the checks and balances. And that kind of funnels back to that original question you gave us on, you know, the brain and figuring out why you want to figure things out. I have always sort of looked at the world as like a massive science lab. I guess blame it on watching all the Phil Nye the Science Guy and Magic School Bus. Like, you know, learn by making mistakes and getting messy. And I made a few mistakes and a few messes. And so it's like, by learning how to clean that up, you go back and you revisit. Oh, I remember this feeling. This feels familiar. Last time I felt like this happened. What did I do last time? Well, you got in the car last time. What happened when you got in the car? A whole bunch of crazy shit happened when you got in the car. So, It's been 7 years and we still
You know
gonna
what
be
happened in the car.
You know what happened in the
What
car.
happened in the car.
Don't get back in the car. That's one. Or it's more of a like, for me, I recall a lot of moments of like feeling like I was fighting uphill because what I was taught to say or do or believe, did not go in accordance with my intuition. And so I recall many of like my grade school days being wrought with academic excellence and punishment surrounding insubordination or defiance. Because if it didn't make sense, I wasn't gonna do it. I don't care. You're 3 times my age. Awesome. I still don't care. I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
Mr. Like, ma'am, sir, however you identify, I'm not doing that shit. That don't add up.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, look, no. And so as an adult, that being part of what helps me maintain my due north, because it's like you already know how your internal litmus test works. Does it add up to you or does it not? Well, if it doesn't, now we run back and check, well, how does spirit feel about this? And that's the biggest thing. It's like, all right, well, it doesn't work up here. What does my intuition say? Because if my intuition says something, even if my brain is freaking out, like, nah, we're not going. If intuition says we need to, well, maybe this is a growth opportunity. Like, let's push past this discomfort.
Yeah.
And then eventually you get comfortable enough being uncomfortable to where your comfort zone expands. And then something beautiful happens. In other, and in other contexts, like, if it doesn't jive with your intuition, even if I can't wrap my brain around it, I'm going to lean in the direction of intuition because I know what it is to have my intuition tell me something one day and me ignore it because I don't see how it adds up. And 7 years later, it hits you like a ton of bricks and it's just, wow. That's why.
Yeah, so exactly. It is a balance. And so I think that for all of you out there, whether you are a male or female, I'm actually interested in learning how we can actually like build better understandings on how to follow our intuition. So I would like to offer you that the intuition is more of a feeling. Your gut brain is operating on feeling, not necessarily thinking. You're not going to try to rationalize the shit out of a situation whenever you feel it in your intuition. So I want to offer you guys that and just move on to the other part that JD was just leading into was this idea of spirit. So you've had this reaction from your mind and from your ego brain and you've processed the emotion and the logic and you tried to figure it out, but then your brain and the gut is telling you something, but yet you're still confused. Now, where do we go, right? And now we talk about the actual first brain. The first brain is actually your heart. There's a brain within your heart. Now, the reason that I left that for the first brain is such. Whenever you are in utero and you are developed in your mom's womb, the first thing that is formed is the heart. And it's like a tiny little spark of a heart, like a little spark. And it's like the heartbeat. You can see this little thing just, and then suddenly your whole body grows around the damn heart. And it's like, whoa, that's crazy. So I'm like, only my heart. You don't got no brain yet. You don't got no organs yet. You don't got shit. You just a heart. You don't even got no bones, no muscles, nothing. Just a heart. And so with this known fact, it automatically helps us understand that the heart and the brain within your heart, which is called the intrinsic cardiac nervous system, is where you really operate from. Now, because I'm good with pictures and I like people to visualize shit, we're going to show you this image here that will help you understand what it is that we're talking about. And again, it's going to be real quick. We're just going to run through it. I want you guys to see what it is that you're actually have inside of your body. So this is your heart, if you didn't know, FYI. This is the the right side of your body. This is more towards the center line of your chest. Now, this little node is called the sinoatrial node or the SA node, which sends signals to this little node, which is the atriovicular node or the AV node. Don't worry, you don't got to remember that shit. And then that sends the signal down these wires that are called, oddly so, peduncles. Who the fuck? And then those make your heart beat. And so from there, this little interaction was the first part of you. But this is also where you get your heart broken. You know, whenever you had that feeling that my heart is just shattered because he or they done crushed my shit. We do something like this. We actually automatically want to be like, damn, that shit hurt. Because that's where the brain that is processing this information is. And that's why you feel this tension and this pain, because it's coming from that true part of you. And then you build up those walls, right? We start building up walls and shit, saying like, fuck that. I ain't never gonna let that shit hurt me again. Fuck them. Watch. Exactly. And now you boxed off. And so for all of you out there, the crowd, did you know that there was a brain in your heart? Yes or no? And for you two, what do you guys actually like? What stories or what thoughts do you have about this connection to your heart, or many times that you possibly you like maybe whether it was heartache or maybe even like some type of growth where you grew a lot, matured a lot within your true self? Do you guys have any stories or any times where you noticed that this was happening within your heart space specifically?
I think for me, it's funny, like how consciousness kind of works, right? Like, it's interesting the things that, like, when you're asked a question or like a topic comes up, they kind of come up to consciousness, right? And for whatever reason, as you were talking about like heartbreak, right, and like genuine kind of heartbreak, I immediately went to my grandmother's funeral. And my grandmother was more my mom than she was my grandmother. And it was one of those situations that I've maybe experienced this one other time in my life where I was literally like, I was in my spirit above my body watching myself grieve. Like literally watching myself like lose my shit and like punching concrete, punching like the grass. Like I'm literally like, I have an above the head shot of all of this happening, like my sister trying to calm me down, or like me getting into a fight with my uncle.
Yeah, proper out of body experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I legit had like the memory that I have of this event is not first person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. I literally have seen this all happen, and for me, like that was the most gut wrenching experience that I've ever had, and like physically, like I couldn't breathe. Like my chest felt, like it was closing in. Like there was a very visceral, physical, overwhelming reaction that couldn't have just come from my mind, right? Because my mind would have rationalized it. Like it's cancer. You know that this is what happens. Like it would have done all that, right? I would have still had a response, but like it would have rationalized a lot of it. But like there was no logic there, right? It was a response to this thing that was tethered to that brain, right? Tethered to that part of myself. And like, it was no longer there. And like, I physically responded to that. And like, again, like had this overhead, like drone image of this entire thing happening, because that's what my experience of it was.
Yeah. Dope. How about yourself, JD?
For me, I guess one could say that I've either been very fortunate or unfortunate. My family dynamic has always been interesting in that I've always had a lot of the elders close. And so as is common custom, before people transition, they usually get some crazy set of like downloads or visits, as we say. It's not rare for people to be in a hospital on their deathbed, and it's like, oh yeah, people came to see me today, and they look at the log, and it's like, no one's in there. What are you talking about? Yeah. And so for me, like my first experience was that came from a very, this feels familiar, but I know I've never been here before or seen this or been told that. Also, I'm asleep, but I didn't realize I was asleep till I woke up. And that's where I had to start learning how to decipher between what my brain could make sense of and what I knew intrinsically was something that was real and true. And to be honest, like that was sort of wrought with fear because once again, no frame of reference whatsoever for any of that. Like they don't That wasn't part of the DARE program. That wasn't an after school special. Like, who was gonna give you that type of game, right? So on one hand, it made for a very confusing childhood in some aspects, but on another, it gave a crazy foundation for the types of questions that one could ask once you got exposed to more information. And so it's funny, like learning about how the body has receptors for more things than we can even fathom. So much so that Western medicine is just starting to really like get the frame of reference to measure the existence, because what's measured gets managed, right? So like we're just getting the tools to measure the existence of something that can interpret intuition or love as like a natural aspect of physics. So it's
and that I think that's one of that's the takeaway right there, is that love aspect, you know, and understanding that in the heart is only this aspect of love, because you are created and you're this child, and the child only knows trust and love and innocence. It doesn't know anything else. So living in that moment is pretty powerful, because what happens is that you get in touch with this deeper part of yourself, which is like tethered to the soul, tethered to the inner child and the subconscious mind. Now, the subconscious mind, we really don't have time to get into, because that is a whole nother thing. But whenever you understand the subconscious mind, you understand that it is more about what is going to be best for you in the moment's time, and understanding that being authentic to yourself is the only way that you can actually get to that space of the subconscious mind. Now, Crystal, she was stating that she got really ill whenever she went on a date with her father's child. When I went on my first date with my child's father, I got ill. Now, that is a little bit of your intuition, but it's more so the sympathetic nervous system reaction. It's you get nervous and, you know, you release all these hormones, and it pretty much makes you really sick, because the nerves are starting to work up to a point where it just needs to throw up. Like, it just needs to let all that energy out. But with that said, it is about that time. But I wanted to just really bring this all together by redefining this concept of the mind. Now that we have these new concepts in place, the question is the mind in the brain, like we've been taught, right? Westernized medicine teaches us that the mind is up here. And then that plays a really big mind fuck on us, because this is all ego shit. So if the ego is really like the mind, then we're always going to be in defense mode or in like run some shit over mode. So that can't be the truth, because we have this idea called empathy. And so with that said, we're going to leave on that note. And as far as the conversation in itself, if you guys need to go back and get some more of this information, the replay will be up on YouTube. I'd like to end with saying two things. Thank you for my brothers, Los, JD. It is not only a pleasure to have you on, but it's always a pleasure to build. And literally every time we get together, we laugh. And that's one of the best parts about being around you, because laughing is medicine, my dudes. So I appreciate you so much. I like to also thank Mastermind Connect, Holy Men, bringing this together so that we can start to redefine. If any of you men or women that may know some man that wants to be a part of this collective, they can check us out at mastermindconnect.com, where it is a brotherhood that is built off reciprocity, resources, respect. And we really do live by those. We are a for real brotherhood. I ain't gonna front. It's changed my life. Without these men, I would not only be where I'm at in a business world, but also in a maturity world of just learning how to redefine myself as a man. And I also want to give a big shout out to Manny Almonte. He's in the background making all this happen, like always, doing his thing. Yeah, he's the wizard. And for all of you who want to check out what it is that we do, once again, mastermindconnect.com. We also have a app that we use, which is an internal interface that we are actually all on. You can have it on your phone, or you can log into the website. It is the Alchemy platform. In fact, as JD is showing it with his black screen, we are actually going to jump off here to go there to have more of a private event for all of our members, because that's how we do. We like to get together. So if you want to inquire, once again, mastermindconnect.com. My name is Omar Davis. Thank you guys so much for being here. If you want to join us next week, we are going to be live January 6th with two guests, Ivo Filbert and Ocean Phoenix. So join us then. We're going to be talking more about the miracle body. So with that said, much love to all. We out.